This is the Underwater Kingdom, my most unique mega build to date. And in this episode, things are about to get a whole lot crazier. So far, this project has taken hundreds of hours, and there's still so much more to do. We've created a crazy custom ocean environment, a massive organic castle, laid foundations for some in-depth lore, and built an entire upper district of the city. Plus, we've even managed to raise some money for charity along the way. So, what's next for the Underwater Kingdom? Well, we're going to be tackling these areas, adding an important mystical relic, grand castle gardens, massive statues, a large area for the kingdom's complex upper military base, and an absolutely gigantic ship-sinking creature. And of course, we'll be delving deeper into the lore, which is only going to get more exciting with each episode. So, let's get this video to 150,000 likes and I'll continue the project. Then you can check it out for yourselves via Patreon once it's all finished. Now, before we dive further into the Underwater Kingdom, let's talk about today's sponsor, the mighty Raid Shadow Legends. If somehow you haven't heard of this popular RPG, then you're missing out on loads of crazy characters and lore. Meet the Bannerlords, a faction of medieval knights. They were founding members of an alliance created to suppress the forces of evil. However, they're now in conflict with their old allies, and many fear that the king is being influenced by a growing shadow. Perhaps the campaign will reveal what happens next. My favourite Bannerlord champion is Septimus. He looks absolutely insane with his ornate armour and winged helmet. Plus, he's got some seriously powerful abilities. I love that you can use the summoning portal to get new champions for your collection. I actually just won a mystery shard unlocking a Dark Elves champion. Recently, Raid has released loads of new clan features. Work together on brand new quests, get exclusive clan benefits, and access powerful items in the clan shop. Loads of new champions have been added, which you can collect from fragments in the Doom Tower. And on top of all of that, there are a bunch of events and competitions to try out. Go download Raid now and get a huge head start. You can either click the links down in the description, or you can scan the magical QR code right here. You'll get an epic hero called Chonaru, plus you'll get 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, 200,000 in silver, and 1 ancient shard. You'll find these epic rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days only. Just click the link in the description and your journey begins. So let's jump straight into the building and create some giant statues to decorate our grand castle entrance. Since this is an underwater build, I couldn't exactly build a person riding a horse. So I opted for the ocean's equivalent. I used Prismarine to whip up an organic seahorse structure, sculpting and shaping using slabs and walls to get him looking as detailed and realistic as possible. Next, I add in our underwater warrior riding on the back, holding a huge trident in a dynamic sort of attack pose, ready to ward off enemies of the kingdom. The hardest part with these statues is getting the head right, so I spent a bit of time tweaking it before adding a little helmet and playing around with different block material combinations. I settle on a mixture of Prismarine and the new copper blocks for the seahorse, and quartz bricks, white concrete, and the new calcite blocks for the warrior. I place the statues either side of the entrance on a round plinth, embellishing them with greenery, including the new moss and drip leaves for a sort of mossy effect, later adding a subtle glow with some glow lichen. Now, I mentioned in the last part of this project that I had a large spectacle planned for this lower section where the upper city's balcony overlooks. So in this part, it's time to create one of the Underwater Kingdom's most precious possessions, the giant pearl clam. This pearl is actually a legendary relic, which binds an ancient spell protecting the kingdom from harm. The spell compels a certain menacing creature to do no harm to the Underwater Kingdom, but to instead protect it from attack from other kingdoms. Stick around to see what this certain creature is and why the Underwater Kingdom needs such a huge bodyguard. Now that we have our precious pearl clam in position, I thought what a better way to decorate the area for the upper city onlookers and disguise the importance of this relic than adding some gardens. Of course, there will be some further defences added, so let me know in the comments how you think the pearl should be protected. For the gardens, I add some bubble geysers, since ordinary fountains would be a complete failure underwater, and then I create an intricately patterned seaweed and coral garden, kind of like the gardens that you see at big castles and mansions. I tried to incorporate some recognisable elements whilst staying true to the underwater theme by using coral where possible. To finalise this area, I build staircases to link the gardens to the existing pathways above, decorate with the custom seaweed we created previously, and tidy up the pearl clam's plinth. So let's take a quick look to see how this area is looking. Now, taking a look at these statues up close, they are absolutely massive and make for an epic entrance to the castle. Heading over to the Pearl Clam and Gardens, I think this area ended up looking really cool, and it gives me a castle garden vibe, but with a few aquatic undertones coming through. Anyway, let's get back to building. Since we now have giant statues depicting warriors on seahorses, I knew that I had to add in seahorse stables for the Underwater Kingdom's actual defences. So, in the empty area behind one of the statues, I built a large stable building to house the kingdom's team of cavalry seahorses. To differentiate the main upper city from the kingdom's more functional buildings, I used darker materials for the roof, including the new deep slate blocks mixed with some stone brick. Now I know that adding this fence may seem ridiculous since we're talking about seahorses here, but hear me out. When the seahorses are kept here, they have a small device attached to their tails, which allows them to swim around this area but not beyond or above the fence. This is actually for their own protection, as the open water is very dangerous, which is why most of the buildings in the kingdom operate at sea level. With the exterior of our seahorse stables complete, I add a few little seahorses to decorate, which are obviously very basic due to the scale, but I really think they bring the area to life. To complete this area, I head inside the stables and build some little pens and some basic decorations to finish things up. Don't worry, I come back later on and add in a bit of lighting. Next up, it's time to tackle that large area that I left blank on the right side of the castle entrance, which I'll be dedicating to the kingdom's upper military base. To kick things off, I build the military barracks, to house the kingdom's warriors and provide them with sleeping quarters. I paste a few of these in a row, taking inspiration from real-life army barracks for the layout and design. Before I get further into creating more military buildings, I whip up a large ballista, since the kingdom's definitely going to need some long-range weapons to defend itself. And of course, rather than using conventional ammunition like spears or stones, these merpeople use magical tridents that surge through the water like high-speed missiles. With the ballista ready to duplicate and scatter around a little later, I reposition the seahorse statues so that they're a little bit more prominent on a higher plinth, before designing the walls and watchtowers to house the military area. Remember, the open water is very dangerous, so this will allow the military to keep watch from all angles. Now to place the walls and watchtowers, starting with an entrance branching off the main pathway to the castle. I continue the wall around the area, placing watchtowers at each corner and entrenching the structure into the rock below. For our main military building, I wanted to create a sort of bastion loosely inspired by the Star Fort structure, acting as the main military base for planning and last resort protection. So, with that in mind, I start by detailing the first protruding section, which I end up tweaking quite a lot to strike the balance between a menacing fortress and a building that fits in with the rest of the Underwater Kingdom. I eventually settle on the material and design, before pasting the corner section onto each corner of the building. I then began working on the domed roof, but I felt like it was beginning to look a little too similar to the upper city's town hall. So instead, I extended the corner sections and got rid of that large domed roof. I added in a bunch of crenellations and details before topping it off with a small domed roof and taller towers for keeping watch. I think it turned out super unique, but fit for purpose. Now to quickly whip up an interior for this building, I place down some pillars and create a large map table in the centre, ready for military planning and briefings, with plenty of space for our troops up top. Back outside, it's finally time to place those ballistas around the military base. I decided to place 2 at the main entrance in front of the seahorse statues, with 3 more around the right side of the base, including small walkways from the walls down to the ballista platforms. To finish up the military base, it's time to add an archery range, or perhaps a trident throwing range, and of course some terraces with a bunch of supplies. Then I add a small round building to act as a bell tower to alert the troops, with some space for a small medical wing below. Next up, it's time to create the forge building where the kingdom's giant tridents and other weapons and armour are made. The mer people of course use bubble fuel, so the chimney on this building is obviously expelling excess bubbles from inside the building. For the rest of the base, I whip out the wool again as always for some planning, before making a start on some of the outbuildings. Now I haven't added interiors to all of these, but I'd imagine they'd be used for a food hall, main medical centre, armour storage, weapons storage and combat training. So let's take a quick look around our military base. We of course have our lovely little seahorse stables for our cavalry team to live, and a whole military base packed with training grounds, living quarters, storage, a forge, a bastion building and more. And as you can see, I'm an absolute pro at the archery thanks to the mer people's training. And let's not forget the giant trident ballistas sat outside. Now that we've checked out the military area, it's time for the main event, creating the legendary Giant Kraken. Now, as I mentioned before, the pearl we created earlier is actually the key to a powerful enchantment that keeps this big boy from destroying the entire kingdom. Can you imagine all of the mess that he'd make? If you guys have a good memory, you'll remember that the underground kingdom was one of the underwater kingdom's biggest rivals, and perhaps we'll see those pesky sea serpents a little bit later in this project. But for now, let's focus on this menacing Kraken, who has protected the underwater kingdom for as long as the mer people can remember. In an epic battle between 3 divided kingdoms, the underground kingdom sent its most powerful dragon to raid an enemy galleon from the mysterious coastal kingdom. The galleon, armed with giant crossbows and catapults, was able to defeat the dragon and its remains fell to the bottom of the ocean. The coastal kingdom had sent the galleon to attack the underwater kingdom in a hunt for buried treasure, but was soon faced with the monstrous tentacles of this enormous kraken, which tore the ship from the surface, leading it to a fate suffered by so many more. Now the real question is, what is this mysterious coastal kingdom? Who knows, but perhaps we'll find out someday. With the head finally completed in true Davy Jones style, it's time to move on to the tentacles, to really bring this monster to life. Since I'm building this whole thing organically, it takes a really long time to sculpt and map out the shapes. Although for these organic builds, my experience in VFX comes in really handy. Now, as you can see, I'm using world edit spheres to map out each tentacle, which definitely made it much easier when tackling all 8 of these limbs. Perhaps if you're a fan of the Ultimate Survival world, you'll recognise the ship currently in the Kraken's clutches. Maybe the Ultimate Survival world is a distant land and these ships were from the same fleet as the ones you'll find there. Or maybe this is just a cool Easter egg that I thought I'd include for you guys. I guess you'll never know. Anyway, I continue mapping out each of the tentacles, sprawling out in different directions and adding another USW ship in the Kraken's clutches to finish up this epic battle scene. To add the finishing touch, I paint the Kraken with prismarine and copper blocks to add some texture to his skin, with some white concrete and calcite for the underside of the tentacles. Last but not least, it's time to add the shipwreck graveyard, where the Kraken's many victims now rest. I paste in lots of these ships, adding some variation and destroying them at different severities to show that some took more of a beating from the Kraken, or to show that they've been sitting on the ocean floor longer than others. And with our menacing Kraken complete, you can see just how epic this whole scene looks. I'm so proud of how he turned out, and now let's take a proper look at our progress from this part. Now before you head off, stick around for this next part as I've got a bunch of important updates for you. It's okay, put me on 2x speed if you're in a rush. Firstly, thank you so much for the support and make sure you hit that like button down below for the next part. Throw all of your ideas down in the comments below and get involved. Steph and I have made plans for an entire lower district, more sea creatures, some huge buildings and monuments, heaps of treasure, and a really cool link to the underground kingdom for the next few episodes. So you won't want to miss out. Now, to give you guys a heads up, I'm going to be releasing some merch soon. I've listened to your requests and we've made a few super wearable, affordable options for you guys to choose from. So be sure to keep an eye out for some updates on that. Now, if you don't see your favorite idea in launch 1, then it may just be something that we've got planned for a later merch launch. Remember to check out my Patreon for plenty more epic builds to explore. And remember, you can always just pay once, get all of my completed builds, and then cancel your subscription if you don't want to pay monthly. And of course, I'd love you to join the TrixyBlox Discord and get involved in the Blox fam community for some wholesome fun. Plus, it's the best place to ask questions, make some build suggestions, and get tech support for my Patreon. You can find all of my links down below in the description. And finally, I'd like to thank Jake Rivers for composing some music for this project. He's a real talent and I'm sure that you're going to see more of his custom music around on the channel. So be sure to check out his links down below as well. And of course, don't forget to check out Raid Shadow Legends with the link in the description for some epic rewards. Thanks again for being such a great community. I love seeing all your guys' creative suggestions and I couldn't keep doing this without your support. But other than that, I look forward to seeing you guys back in the Ultimate Survival world for the next video.